thank you to everybody who's joining us on this call today. You know, over the past few weeks, we have seen a lawless Trump administration attempt a hostile takeover of our nonpartisan career civil service, from firing career prosecutors at the Department of Justice to gutting the entire federal agency, USAID, pressuring nearly the entire federal workforce to take a so-called buyout offer that reads a lot more like a scam, putting people on administrative leave en masse for no reason, and threatening sweeping layoffs for people who stay, locking employees out of their offices, out of their devices, and telling them to cease all work and even communication without notice, and belittling public employees at every turn, including by calling their jobs, quote, lower productivity than jobs in the private sector. The assault that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are waging on federal workers is staggering and unprecedented. And last week, over Democrats' objections, Senate Republicans confirmed Russell Vought to lead the Office of Management and Budget. This is someone who said he wanted to inflict trauma on our federal workers. That is an insane way to talk about a workforce that we all rely on for some absolutely essential services. Now, there are more than 56,000 civilian federal workers in Washington state and 2.4 million across the country. We're talking about everyone from folks who support the nuclear cleanup work at the Hanford site, to scientists at the Pacific Northwest National Lab, to the people who are making sure you get your Social Security check. These are civil servants who took an oath to our country and are working tirelessly to get veterans their health care, inspect our meat processing facilities, make sure baby formula is safe, approve life-saving drugs and treatments, manage our air traffic control, protect consumers from fraud, and help ensure we have clean drinking water, just to name a few. They deserve better than to be threatened, intimidated, and pushed out the door by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. But make no mistake, we actually need these people to stay in their jobs, or things are going to start breaking. What everyone needs to understand is that this administration's attacks on federal workers don't just hurt those workers, they hurt people all over our country. Veterans suffer when they have to wait longer at the VA. Seniors suffer when they can't get someone to just answer the phone at the Social Security Administration. We all suffer when we don't have federal watchdogs going after scams or investigating crimes, when we don't have researchers at NASA or NIH making new breakthroughs, or park rangers who are keeping our national parks open for people to enjoy. The American government is not just Twitter. You can't just run around breaking things and hope for the best. Americans rely on our federal workforce. They do essential and often thankless jobs to keep our country running. And sometimes their work can be the difference between life and death. So I want to say a huge, sincere thank you to federal workers in Washington state and across the country. You make our country better. And I want you to know I'm in your corner, and I'm going to keep lifting up your stories, fighting for you, and holding this administration to account. I want to pass it over to some folks today who can share some of the stories they are hearing from federal workers in Washington state. And I'll start with Helen. She's a former EPA employee and the treasurer of AFGE Local 1110 in Seattle.
Thank you so much, Senator. Unfortunately, I have to say, that introduction was a perfect description of what we're starting to see and hear at the EPA. I was active in the union when I was an active duty employee. I retired in 2023, and I've recently come back to help our executive board because unfortunately, a good number of people on our executive board have resigned from the union board out of fear of retaliation, and I think also just sheer exhaustion. And so the unions are needing help as well as just our federal workers. So I've come back and have recently become our treasurer. The stories I'm hearing from my former colleagues are just heartbreaking. I've heard stories about people having panic attacks so severe that they landed in the ER. I've heard stories about people who can't sleep and who become just physically ill because of the stress. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about their families, they're also worried about their work and the communities they serve. It's amazing. I've heard recently from people that have been placed on administrative leave, and the thing they most wanted to talk to me about was their work. They were really worried about their grantees. They feel like they've made a personal commitment to these communities, and they're really anxious that somebody can take over and make sure that their grantees get the funds that they need to do the important work. I have seen that infamous fork in the road memo, and the language that is being used it's disgusting. It's insulting, it's degrading, it's abusive. It's no way to treat people. No one should be treated like that. And I'll say, Senator, right now, I'm hearing, especially from members of EPA's LGBTQ community, they're especially feeling vulnerable and persecuted because this administration seems intent on building an inherently hostile work environment for them. And people are not wrong to be afraid. The purge has begun at EPA. Last Thursday, 9 employees from EPA's regional office were placed on administrative leave very suddenly and with almost no warning. And they were singled out because they work on environmental justice issues. And they were placed on administrative leave. They are locked out of the office. They're not allowed to use any agency systems or log into any systems or communicate with their colleagues. And they are being paid for now, but they don't know how much longer that pay will continue. And they have literally no idea what will happen next. Are they going to be just fired, demoted, moved into a different job, forced to move to a different state? They just don't know. And that uncertainty is really stressful. And it's just chaos. And I think the chaos is intentional. It's designed, engineered to make people afraid, to break people's spirits, and to divide them. And I have to say on that front, it's not all going to plan. I've also seen a lot of EPA's employees really rally. They're rallying to protect and support each other, to be kind to one another, and to do the work as best as they possibly can in this crazy environment, to communicate regularly with their grantees and be as open and clear as they possibly can. And so I think, I had one employee say to me just yesterday, she said, our morals and our ethics are immutable. We are united in our concern for the environment. So the spirit of EPA is still there. The agency is not broken yet, but boy, it feels like the wrecking ball is at the door. And so I think I'm thankful for this opportunity, Senator, and I'm thankful for your work, and I wish you all the best. We need to save our government. And with that, I think I should hand it over to John, because as a former NOAA employee, I'm really curious to hear what's happening at NWS.
All right. Well, thank you, Helen. And thank you, Senator Murray, for your invitation to speak here today. Good morning. My name is John Fox, and last month I retired from the National Weather Service, which is a division of the National Atmospheric and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, where I was a meteorologist producing life-saving winter weather, severe weather, and fire weather forecasts for nearly the past 35 years. I also worked on the front lines to support wildland firefighters as an incident meteorologist, collaborating closely with state and local fire agencies, as well as the U.S. Forest Service and other federal agencies on 12 years on wildfires. I was also an active member with the National Weather Service Employees Organization, which is a federal employee labor union that represents the National Weather Service employees, as well as employees across other divisions of NOAA. While with the National Weather Service Employees Organization, I served as our office steward for the past 27 years, and I was also voted by the fellow regional members to serve as the Western Region chairperson of NOECIO for the past 4 years. A little background, the employees of the National Weather Service work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year at 122 forecast offices across the United States and territories that provide critical weather forecasts, monitor severe storm impacts, and warn emergency managers. The National Weather Service also has 13 river forecast centers across the country that issue flood and river forecasts, as well as provide water management outlooks. The National Weather Service also operates 21 center weather service units that are co-located with the Federal Aviation Administration regional flight command centers, where aviation meteorologists advise air traffic controllers on the best route to safely bring planes and their passengers home to bypass dangerous storms. Additionally, the National Weather Service also encompasses the National Tsunami Center, the National Hurricane Center, and the Storm Prediction Center, which are also staffed 24/7, 365 days per year by National Weather Service employees. So given the early chaos of this new administration, it's important for the people of Washington State and the country to know the impacts being experienced by our federal employees. There is a real fear about job security that stems from uncertainty about the future. There's been a direct lack of communication from this administration. In fact, the only source of information, which is more or less misinformation, comes from social media outlets that are only serving to stoke more fear into the federal workforce. During the presidential campaign last year, the president disavowed any knowledge of the Heritage Foundation Project 2025 recommendations, one of which specifically called for NOAA to be broken up. It's news reports like this that are promoting fear with federal employees and not getting straight answers that has many folks worried about their future employment in the federal civil service. Up until now, and including this administration, federal employees collectively don't care who the president of the United States is because they serve the American people. For the National Weather Service employees, their mission is to save lives and property and promote the enhancement of the national economy. That is their sole focus, and they take their responsibility quite seriously. Frankly, I think they deserve better from this administration. So thank you, Senator Murray, for listening to me today and doing some very important work on our behalf. So with that, I will pass it to Steve then.
Thank you, John. My name is Steve Kofal. I worked for 42 years at the Social Security Administration, ending in 2015. My job was to serve the public face-to-face in field offices, and I loved the work, and I learned how important the programs that Social Security runs are to people across the board, whether they're aged, disabled, survivors, dependent children. Everybody is protected in one way or another. And so that fork in the road message that our current employees received was absolutely devastating. We got calls, I got calls, my wife got calls from people who were panicked and afraid and had no idea what they should do. We already had a devastating problem with poor morale at Social Security because of ongoing staff cuts over the years. As the senator knows, it's been almost impossible for Congress to do their business in the orderly way that was intended, so that we can get budgets that meet needs of agencies. We continually have continuing resolutions, and it just passes on the same low spending levels to a new year where inflation has caused those dollars to be less valuable. So we already had a workforce that was demoralized. According to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey a couple of years ago, it was the lowest ranked of the large agencies in terms of employee morale, and that's really painful for me to see happening to an agency I worked for so long. The fork in the road messages were rescinded except for headquarters employees at Social Security, but we still don't know what's going to happen next. We know that from what we can tell from Project 2025, the Republican Study Group, the Republican budget proposals, and so forth, that there's an intention to cut Social Security staff, to reduce Social Security offices, and by doing that, reducing service. Terminating federal leases, which Musk has announced that he intends to do or is doing, would wipe out virtually every Social Security office in the country, where all of them, with few exceptions, are in lease space now. So people don't know how they're going to work, how they're going to serve the public. It's just a horrible situation. Social Security is extremely important to Washingtonians. We collectively receive $118.5 billion a month that goes into the economy. And by and large, this money goes directly out into the communities to purchase goods and services and pay basic needs for almost 1.5 million beneficiaries. That's at risk because people are going to have to wait even longer to receive service if we're decimated by staff cuts and office closures than they do now. Currently, we have more than 1 million disability benefit applications pending final decisions in initial claims and appeals. That's a record. 30,000 people died last year while waiting for a decision on their Social Security disability claim or appeal. That's inexcusable. It takes over 800 days total on average for a person who files a disability application and has to go through the full appeals process to get a final decision. That's way out of bounds. People can't wait that long. They are being ruined financially. Their health obviously is not being improved by this situation. We desperately need more staff, and we need to be allowed to pay for that staff out of the Social Security trust funds by raising the limit on how much money is allowed for us to use. This does not involve new tax money. This is funds from the Social Security trust funds that are dedicated to paying for administration. And so if we could get just a small bump up to historic levels of approximately 1.2% of trust fund payouts to be used for administration, we could vastly improve service and restore the pride that people at SSA used to have and unfortunately don't have any longer. That's what I had to say for my remarks. I don't believe there's another speaker, so I will turn it back. Thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Steve. Naomi, I'll turn it over to you to call on questions.
Perfect. We'll open things up. If anyone from the press has any questions, please go ahead and use the raise hand function and we'll call on you. Our first question is from Orion with the Spokesman Review.
Thank you, Naomi. Sorry, I just remuted myself accidentally. And thank you, Senator, for doing this and everyone else on the call. Senator Murray, there's, of course, been a lot of developments here in the past couple of weeks. All these different agencies that we've seen dismantled by Elon Musk and the Doge team. I wonder how much you and your allies can do to sort of head this off, as they're now taking aim at other agencies rather than just responding. Obviously, the courts have paused some of these actions, but it's unclear how much of that can actually be reversed. I wonder what you might do proactively to defend other federal agencies and federal workers.
Well, Orion, that's a really important question, and Democrats are in the minority, and these actions are being taken by, as you said, the Trump administration and Elon Musk, and we are doing everything we can to raise the stories, lift up the stories, tell the stories of what is actually happening, so American people can join with us to fight back and do everything we can to stop this. And I think it's really important for people to understand why they are going about this, trying to fire and eliminate positions and make it really virtually hard and chaotic for our federal employees, is they want them to quit so that they can take that money back to Washington, D.C. to use for the humongous tax cuts they are promising to billionaires. The only way they can do that is to have the offsets of less federal spending. And they're putting that right on the backs of federal employees who obviously, as you are hearing, impacts every single one of them personally, but it also really impacts the jobs, the work that we count on, whether it's somebody who is desperately trying to figure out how to get their Social Security benefit and there's no one answering the phone, or whether they're trying to get a permit to do a project in our forestries, or in trying to get energy rules passed, and there's nobody there that can process the claims, or whether it's the information people need that John talked about. The National Weather Service giving us all critical information, giving our firefighters information, giving our air traffic controllers critical information, giving us information so we know as we go to work. These are all people-oriented jobs. They don't happen by AI or some robot sitting in a room. They happen by real live people who can do that work. So decimating that workforce, laying them off, putting them in chaos, as you've heard, only to create enough money to pay off billionaires is not what I believe is what's right for our country. And I think people need to lift up their voices and call this administration out for it.
Thank you. I'll hold another question if there's time.
If anyone has a question, use the raise hand feature so that we can call on you. Great. Our next question is from John at KUOW.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is for the Weather Service and EPA union folks. I'm wondering if you're hearing of the agencies in the Northwest in particular being ordered to stop or change the work they're doing. You mentioned the environmental justice people being put on leave. I wonder if there are other examples. I've heard that NOAA, for example, employees have been told to stop any international engagement. So I wonder if you have any details on, beyond just layoffs or staff levels, what your agencies are being, how they might be told to stop or change the work they're doing.
Sure, this is Helen Botcher from the EPA. And, you know, the most immediate impact is those employees that have been placed on administrative leave. That's the most direct impact we've heard. But the other thing that's happening and causing so much chaos is the withholding federal payments. And that's still, I mean, there's been a court order to restart all those payments, but it's not working. And there's been sort of other stoppages. We heard just last week on Thursday and Friday some more, some other things being restricted, and our grantees are telling us that they're not able to make drawdowns. So the money that they're legally entitled to, they've been awarded, they're not able to get it, and so that leaves them in this bind of they don't know if they should proceed with work or not. So I think that's a broader impact that's affecting all of our programs in the region.
Yeah, hi, this is John Fox from the National Weather Service. Since I just retired a few weeks ago, I'm not aware of what impacts this is having right now on the National Weather Service, so I can't answer that question as far as other parts of NOAA.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll go to Jake with the Washington State Standard.
Hey, thanks for doing this. This question's for Helen again. You mentioned the 9 employees being placed on administrative leave at the regional office. Is that the Seattle office? And can you say a little bit more about the work that those people do?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jake. Yes, those are our folks assigned to the Seattle regional office, and they work in, they were swept up because they do work that either touches or is directly around environmental justice. And it appears to us that what happened is the DOJ people came in and they got access to everyone's personnel records, and they put their performance evaluations through some AI screen. And if the words environmental justice or underserved communities, things like that came up, they were flagged. And then anybody that was deemed to do more than 50% of their work serving disadvantaged communities or working on environmental justice was targeted. And it's not very clean. I'll say that at least one person that's been placed on administrative leave we don't think, do any real environmental justice work. And they got caught up in this. And it's not been consistent between the different EPA regions. And talking to our colleagues in other regions, it seems like this has been messy at best. But what these people do is environmental education and work with disadvantaged communities to help them understand and overcome contamination and other environmental threats in their communities.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions. If anyone has a question, you can use the raise hand function. Or if you're not sure about the raise hand function, you can just go ahead and unmute and ask a question directly. Ryan, we'll go to you.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind me asking a second question, I'd like to hear from anyone on this. There's been reporting that part of what the DOGE initiative is trying to do in the a sort of end game is automating a lot of jobs away. And I wonder what that would do to the federal workforce. What concerns you have about obviously not only the impact that would have on people's livelihoods, but on the jobs you all have done, the kinds of jobs you all have done, and if there are any examples of how you think that would not work.
Yeah, this is Steve. I could respond a bit on that with the Social Security population we serve. We have many people with foreign languages that we need to accommodate through our translation services. We have people who need great assistance to just do business with us. People with mental illnesses often need to have someone accompany them to an interview so that they're brave enough to come in and talk to us when we need to take an application or take some other action. It's hard to imagine how this can all be done through automation. We need to have a personal touch. These are human beings at the most critical times of their life when they're facing income loss from retirement, death of a spouse or a parent, or the onset of a disability. There's really no substitute for a human being to assist a person in those kinds of circumstances.
Well, this is Helen. When I retired from EPA, I was working as a Superfund project manager. So my job was to clean up toxic waste sites in Washington State. And I just can't even imagine how AI would do that. It's a very long, complex process to investigate, design sampling programs, collect environmental samples, analyze all the data, determine where the contamination is, come up with a cleanup plan, work with the community to get the community's input and buy-in to the eventual cleanup plan, issue contracts, oversee construction contracts. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. That is not something that a machine could do. Requires years of training and expertise in a variety of fields to pull together as a team to address a complex situation like that.
And this is John Fox. So just from a weather perspective, like my job as the incident meteorologist at a wildfire or some sort of incident, I can't imagine some sort of AI computer talking to the boots on the ground, the people fighting the fires, and predicting exactly what's going to happen with the weather and telling them at the briefings in the morning that are attended up to by 1,000 people. There's no way a computer can do that sort of thing, let alone update the forecast if it's going wrong. If something unexpected changes, AI is not going to get that message out to the people fighting the fires and potentially putting them in grave danger. So I just can't imagine we're anywhere close to that stage right now. So I think it's a horrible idea.
Ryan, I just have to add, there's so many jobs within our federal family that are people oriented, where you need a human contact when you are trying to work through a problem that can understand what you're talking about. But I'm just thinking of park rangers. Now, how are you going to replace park rangers with AI? That just doesn't make sense to me. How are you going to replace nuclear scientists at Hanford who are doing critical cleanup work at AI? I mean, that's there. I give you so many examples. That is a far-fetched idea. And again, the only point of Musk even pushing this along with Trump is that they want to fire those federal employees and somehow take all that money to give out a tax breaks to wealthy without thinking about the human consequences and the impacts to our communities. And finally, I will say all of these employees live in communities in our state and across our country, but they go to the grocery store. They, participate in community activities. They purchase goods and services and buy things in their own community. You tell me what's going to happen to the little corner pizza if 10 employees in that little community are laid off and replaced by AI. That pizza shop's not going to stay open. And I know this because that's what has happened in government shutdowns before, when our federal employees were not getting the salaries that they deserve. So huge impacts that obviously Elon Musk has never had to worry about in his life, and certainly Trump has not either.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
All right, last call for any questions. Go back to John for our last question.
Yeah, thanks for letting me ask another. Senator Murray, so what happens next if the Trump administration does not follow court orders and we have a kind of a seems like a crisis between the different branches of government? What happens next?
Well, the courts have made it very clear, and the judges have made it very clear, that violating a court order will have tremendous consequences. And everyone, I'm not an attorney, but certainly everyone I know that has been involved in this says that is not a viable option for Trump and Musk to even throw out there. I know they always throw out words, we're going to do this. Don't worry, we don't care about courts. Yes, you do. There are consequences. So yes, we will continue to file in courts. People who are being impacted are filing in courts. Those court orders will have to be followed. Here in Congress, we are looking at every lever that we have. We again are in the minority. And what we need to do is call on Republicans to hear what is happening in their own communities and stand up to this atrocity.
All righty. With that, we will conclude the press call. This was recorded. We'll distribute it widely. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.